Okay. I think we're here. Oh, yep, we're good. We're coming through.
Yay!
Yay. How's it going, sir?
It's going pretty special. It's good to be back.
It's good to have you back. It's been a short spell, but you have been missed, and we've got a heck of a script to talk about tonight. Just checking in quick with the chat to make sure the audio is coming through loud and clear. So I appreciate all of you out there listening to help us with that. Um, so how have you been? How have you been, sir? How are things going on your end?
Well, my health is here and there. Most of you people know about that. But not too bad right now. Frustrated. I mentioned a little bit about it. I got some old ghosts from publishing days that have come back to haunt me. That cleanup I have to do. When you become self-published instead of relying on a publisher. Um, Sometimes you find some of the hidden mysteries that the publisher didn't want you to know about, or you find mistakes that they missed, and that's what I'm cleaning that stuff up. So keeps me busy.
Yep, oh, I can very much relate to that. But happy to have you here. Looks like everything is sounding great on that end. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs, discussing scripts, both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week is Adega Outlaw. So happy to have you back. We have it's over. Halloween spooky season is over. We're now back into normal, well, less spooky themed screenplays going, and
Halloween is never over.
not not in the soul, right? Oh yeah, but no, Dega, it's always great having you back here again to share your
Yeah,
thoughts. It's always a privilege when another writer is on the dais here, because just a different perspective. Because I like the general audience perspective. I also like other writers' perspective. It keeps things lively in the rotation on the show, and we've got a heck of a good one to discuss today. From the 2023 Blacklist, this script called The Pentester came in 34th with 12 votes, and it's written by Jesse Quinones, who has a few credits under his belt. He's been in the industry as long as I have, mostly a director with some writing as well. Um, this He's directed a movie called Cage Fighter that came out about 4 years ago, which
hmm
you mentioned before the show, Adiga, that you kind of heard of a
I
little
kind of
bit.
heard of it. Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of people I think kind of heard of it because it doesn't have a whole lot of interaction with it. But yeah, let's move on to the next step here. Adega, please share with the audience the log line for Pentester.
this is okay. I'll leave my comments for later, but this is fun. All right, logline. When a pen tester with a perfect track record for breaching his client's security systems takes an unusually high paying job, success proves to be in vain as he finds himself in the middle of a deadly conspiracy where the only way out is forward.
Yes, indeed. The synopsis of this script is when the tech savvy Chris Simpson, a gifted yet wary cybersecurity consultant, is hired to test the defenses of an unhackable company, he soon discovers he's in deeper than he ever anticipated. Tasked with breaking into a fortress like headquarters, Chris is lured by a tantalizing payoff. But as he infiltrates the company's walls, he encounters a deadly conspiracy that's got more to hide than mere data. So, this script, Pentester, the Pentester, um, has a very interesting premise. Uh, Basically, cybersecurity and data theft is like its key components.
Right.
And our main character is Chris Simpsons, and it's Chris with a K. So
Hmm.
that's either what, like a Christoph or something. I don't know what the full. I know Christopher,
What?
Christian. Uh,
That spelling's old too.
yeah.
Chris used to be that spelling used to be big back in the 50s.
Yeah. So given that log line that you that you read, and the way it's worded, um, tell me your first thoughts about Pentester with regards to like a character introduction in the first act.
Well, you know what? It gives a definition at the very beginning of a pen tester, and then it sets the scene by going through a TV screen, and you find out you're finally in a bar and everything like that. Okay, that's an interesting thing, and we're gonna look at the insides of cybersecurity, and it's been done before, but this could be really cool. And it doesn't take very long. I think even on the first page, I start to notice spelling errors. And I was like, oh, gee, okay. Hopefully the story is better than that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we pull out from the TV and the presidential debates and everything's trying to be current with, they even mentioned MAGA and a few other things.
Yep.
Um, you sit down and you're with two guys that are drinking and one's losing bets over and over again. And so it comes time to settle up. And our main guy is, you know what? I'm going to step away for a second. Um, but he challenges the guy that, is this all you want?
With his life.
If
Yeah,
you
yeah.
could do anything, would you do this? Would you do that? You just anything you want. And he's playing with the guy to distract him. And according to the script, the distraction works.
Mm-hmm.
This is where we start finding out who our main guy is and what he's up to. For me, the setup was too phony. It seemed too. I don't know what the word is. It was almost like it's something you would have seen back in the movies back in the 30s or 40s. It was just too easy of a play to get the guy's information, get him to drink a lot, get him to talk a lot, and then we're gonna copy your information on your lanyard. And
Yeah. So
so at that point, I thought, you know what? I'm not sure I'm gonna be as excited about this as I thought I was. Anyway, go ahead.
so I will say this: the script is written in a way where it does read fast. It doesn't embellish too much, which is
Right.
one positive I'd give it. But its haste is not just in its descriptions; it's also in its dialogue, where you as the reader and potentially the audience would have to do a lot of heavy lifting in order to be engaged with this story because so little is really kind of provided to you until you get to certain points where so much is provided to you, you're pretty much ready to check out. And in this
Yes.
case here, the context is that we got this guy named Gordon who he's playing with his security lanyard in public, which is ridiculous for a
Right.
guy who's got that responsibility. And we have our main character, Chris, who's this smart, handsome African American, as I'm reading from the script. That's how he's described. And he's just chatting up Gordon, and Gordon is just taking it hook, line, and sinker. And it doesn't feel authentic. And it's my
No.
first indication that the writer is doing the worst thing you can do, which is help your main character out of any situation you put them in.
Over and over and over again.
And in this
But
case
no.
here, yeah, like the context is that Chris is just trying to get information out of Gordon, and it's working. And then he's trying to sort of incept an idea that Gordon is unhappy in his job and his marriage, and it's like he's the first person to say, if you could do anything in the world, as you said earlier, what would it be? And Gordon's like, well, I never really thought about that. And I don't believe that to be true for a character like Gordon, who has just revealed that his job is kind of boring and his wife is boring, and his wife and family are boring him as well. It's like if you've come to the realization where you're able to volunteer that information, you've thought about what else you would do with your life before you came to that
Right, right.
conclusion. I mean, it just
And one of
makes
the things too
sense.
I found really hard was when you first start getting in the scene and they're talking, you think, okay, we got some friends here. But these guys just met. I can't see any situation where that seems really plausible where he's gonna lose what, $200 on bets at a table with someone he just met and be that friendly with things. It just seemed really odd, you know?
It really did. So this is a part where it feels like there's a writing lesson which is enter late and exit early. And in this part here, I think this scene we are entered in way too late.
Hmm.
And I think what it should be in order to really show how clever a guy Chris is that Gordon should be shouting at the television because somebody is like of a bad call or something like that. And that's where Chris takes advantage and says, I says, okay, yeah, you're calling it a bad call and your team is you're upset that your team's going to lose. I will bet you that your favorite team will probably end up winning the game in the next 2 minutes and kind of do a flip, right? Like, Gord's this guy's like, oh
Yeah,
man, my Nationals, they're not doing well. I hate them. What the hell? And then Chris says, listen, you know what? There's a chance that they could take it in the last couple minutes. I'll bet you a drink that they do. And he's like, no way, they're down too many. He's like, hey, then what do you have to lose? A free drink. And then boom, that's how you kind of get into your part. And then you can do like a jump cut ahead where they're kind of laughing and joking, and then you realize, okay, that's your breaking of the ice moment. Now we've skipped ahead a couple of hours. Everybody's kind of loosened up from the alcohol, and now you can see Chris kind of playing Gordon for a mark. Right, and the way
exactly.
that we get it, it's
Exactly.
he's already at the playing him for a mark stuff, and we as the audience haven't quite figured out the context yet. But it is set up in a way where the him being played for Gordon being played as a mark is supposed to be the twist, the surprise of the scene, the curiosity that ideally would get an audience to want to rewatch that first scene again with the whole new context that's provided afterwards. And
Now, here's a thought for you, just a
yeah, sure.
question is because it's probably been done before, but I don't recall. What if, you said either too early or too late. What if we cut that late part down? Instead of half of that dialogue, it's pretty much you see Chris finishing the job. He has the lanyard walking out, you see his mark, and that's it. We don't have the conversation of the bet or anything, but that's all you get at the very beginning. We know that he's some kind of digital thief.
Mm-hmm. I mean, again, that could work as well. Um, there's definitely other options to kind of play into this and get the story moving a little faster. And
Right.
in this case here, this is the part where I had to reread this a couple of times because I didn't recognize initially that Chris has this portable RFID reader, which can
Hmm.
scan apparently high tech lanyards, which you and I are discussing before the show. It's like
Right, right.
a lot of these security lanyards, they don't use the same technology that an RFID reader uses to scan. Like the RFID is mostly for like your typical credit card, debit card, a hotel security pass or hotel key
Hmm.
card, those types of things. Um, lanyard those lanyards usually aren't just a tap lanyard; they're also a tap, a keypad, maybe even a biometric
Yep.
component to it as well. Multiple factors of authentication, especially considering that as soon as Chris leaves the bar, and Gordon realizes that he's not coming back, Chris, he pulls off a fake beard and some other apparatus on his body, and he pulls out a backpack from behind a dumpster that's got all of his gear, and he's off to this office building in Washington D.C. And he's got a girl in the chair named Maria, who's this spicy Latin girl, and she's walking him through the job where he is just kind of like breezing through this building to the point where I'm like, if he's supposed to be this security expert, right, and he's
Hmm.
breaking into a high tech building, why is there actually no night security in this building? Like there isn't. We don't even see any sense of that. All we have is like, okay, there's CCTVs. There's no one at a front desk except for maybe this one guy that's eating a sandwich
Right. They're
inside, but
supposed to be motion detectors, and he moves right through them.
yeah,
Says
without
he's
any.
avoiding the motion detectors, but they would have picked him up.
They should. I mean, that's why they're there. I mean, they
Right. Right.
um, and it's crazy. I mean, I just that it's way too easy, and it's not really showing me that Gordon is impressive. It shows me that the um the area with which he's investigating is incompetent. And then this is further reaffirmed when we do a smash cut to the next day where Chris is in the room with his clients, who are the owners of this company, and then Gordon, the guy at the bar who got drunk and got his lanyard copied, is there as well,
Yep.
and Maria is with Chris, and they're just going through like 50 odd gaps in this guy's company's security, and going at number one by one and all this type of stuff. Oh, sorry, 46 vulnerabilities. I just read that. I just saw it, glanced over in the script. 46 vulnerabilities in total. And of course, Gordon gets fired because of this.
Right.
And all they're talking about is like, yeah, this we were able to like disarm a lot of your stuff remotely. Like that's how compromised your system is. And here's your data that we stole, and there's your back, and there's your report, and thank you so much for the $50,000 or so that they got for doing this. And the thing is that I'm like, okay, we get it through within the first 10 pages, which is great, but it feels just so, and then this happens, and then this happens. It's very matter of factly. There's no real drama going on in these first 10 pages, which, I mean, you need that in a story that's about espionage, especially corporate espionage, right?
Right. Right. And there was a huge miss on several character developments as well. We'll get into those, but this whole Maria thing, she was more like a tool than an actual character
Mm-hmm.
because you see her in there discussing things, and then there's the scene where she tries to kiss him and get him upstairs, but it was so out of place. Beforehand, I would think if he's running this mission on this place that hired him to crack into as a Pentester, and they were working on comms, I would think if that was going to be something that happened in the future, there should be some type of innuendo or wordplay over the communication that they're having when he's breaking into the place. But there wasn't any of that. It just popped out of the blue when they're in the car. To me, that seems very unprepared,
Kind of an afterthought.
shallow.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, yeah, I would have loved it if they did all these types of, like, take a page out of James Bond, right? Whenever he's doing something in Communicado and he's doing like he's penetrating
yep,
an office or a building or something, and he's talking to the woman over the comms. He's talking about what he's going to what he plans to do with her when this mission is over, but he's describing it as like I've gotten through the doors, right? Pulled
yep,
back the
yep,
curtains. I'm going to hit the
yep.
button, and he's saying it all with this little charm underneath, and you hear and figure out what the subtext is, and you're like, oh, I see what he's doing. He's
Yep.
dirty old man, but he
Yep. And
does it
it
so
could have
well,
been,
you like it.
yep, could have been very prime for that. Like, oh, you know how to get past security, don't you? Those type of things. It just missed opportunity again and again. That was a big one. Because, like I said, Maria just wasn't important to the story the way they wrote it. She should have been,
Hmm.
but it was too shallow.
Yes, and then the other part too is that it has a certain pacing to it that is very much like television. So this is clearly something that um, the writer is also planning on directing, because he describes certain camera movements and like sweeping shots of DC show us a thriving city filled with throngs of city in the nation's capital. Like that's a quote. Like it's shots of DC show us a thriving city filled with throngs of city in the nation's capital. Like what is that?
Right, right, right.
so so
He rewrote that at least 3 times and forgot to clean it up.
exactly. Um, and then basically we find out that okay, they're coming off their job, they're in the car. Maria's like, hey, we got this other client. This is contact information. He wants to hear you as soon as possible. What is it? Well, we don't have much details, but they're going to pay us a lot more than what, $5 million than what we normally ask for. It's like, wow, I don't know. It seems kind of sketchy. Well, you got the night to think about it. And then he's just like, yeah, I'll go do it. Like, there's no debate, right? There's no motive other than the fact, oh, it's $5 million. Where's
Right.
the moments like, we're as good as we are with our perfect track record. We should be charging more. He's like, well, I know we want to charge more, but I don't want to lose the potential business because this flow here, like this flow of money that's coming in, I can budget for this. I can get out of debt. I can pay off something or whatever at this rate. I don't want to, burn any bridges by charging, 10 times what I have and then losing all these smaller business customers that need my help because they figure they can't. I've priced them out of my services. Like there's nothing of that debate going on or that type of conflict. And it reminds me of the movie like The Saint with Val Kilmer, where he's got a money goal. He's like, all I need is like $3 more million, and then I can retire and not have to worry about
Right.
this anymore. And that means like either one or two more jobs until he gets the big job that's like this will cover everything. And he's just like, well, I can't not do that because that allows me to retire now as opposed to a couple of years from now. So that's the type of motives you would need when you're bringing in a new job with an excessive payment, right?
Hmm.
Not here in this case. It's completely not even addressed. It's just, well, it's $5 million. Well, I don't know. Well, you have to give us more as an audience regarding the I don't know, whether it's through
Right.
dialogue or whether it's through visuals, because what we get next is
He gave us a little attempt. He said, "Well, you're just scared. Like you're scared to come up with Maria. You're scared to take the big job. You're just scared." No, it wasn't believable.
yeah, it also didn't, I mean, show us something that would affirm the fear
Hmm.
by way of, I don't know, maybe making that first job we see him do a bit more challenging than he expected. But when he achieves it, he becomes very cocky and overconfident. I mean, that shows us character, right?
Hmm.
But we don't get any of that. The breaking in and getting the data was easy. Him, setting out what the report to his contractor was
Yeah,
like
he didn't sweat at all. Didn't sweat at
exactly
all.
no harm, no foul. So this whole, oh, you're just scared. It's like, is this the writer's attempt at trying to provide a character flaw with Chris that he's scared? And if that's the case, are we going to actually see him scared? And
Hmm.
spoilers, no, we don't see him scared. but but then we get right into
I don't want to pass up Miss Gonzalez.
yeah, because this is where I wanted to talk about. So we have Miss Gonzalez,
Okay.
who's the landlady, and she's the nosy landlady. So share a little bit of this character that was brought in.
Well, most of you or any of you who've had an apartment before know there are certain rules and certain laws. I think it's pretty much around most of the world, the Western world certainly, where you don't mess with people's mail. You're not allowed to go into their apartments. Uh, and why she was so nosy with him? He pays his bills, everything's done. She seemed unreal, and then she was debating with him over his mail, where it should have stayed in the mailbox. And well, do you want it or not? And that was one of her things. She had a piece of his mail. He didn't know what it was for,
Hmm.
and kind of used it as a almost like a bartering chip to where you get this if I get to know a little bit more about what's going on in your apartment. Well, it was none of her business. It just strange, very uh again, that's a throwback to the 30s,
Hmm.
maybe 100 years ago when people were kind of like that more, at least in the US or some of the bigger cities. But not now. That no, that didn't go over at all because she technically that was breaking the law.
I mean, just I will say this: she didn't open the mail, but she was in possession of it, which
Right,
is right up to
which
the
is
edge.
illegal.
Which is right up to the edge because if she doesn't give it to him or put it in his mailbox and she just holds on to it, that's where your law is broken right then and there.
When
The other part
she
too
wasn't
is,
supposed to receive it from the postman at all.
yeah, the postman should not even entertain the idea of handing it over to her
Right,
either. They
right.
should have put it directly into the proper mail slot and said, sorry. Um, the other part, and this was the only interesting thing she said, and it kind of, I think the writer was trying to use this to justify her intrusiveness, is the fact that, oh, the power keeps kind of going on and off in the building, and it has been ever since you, Chris, moved in. and Chris just kind of like brushes it off. He gets his letter, and then we find out that on his door he's got like 3 or 4 authentication means, 3 or 4 security means that require
Right.
his authentication to get into his place, followed by tons of CCTV cameras, and of course a massive set of computer hardware operating in his apartment nonstop. So it's draining a lot of power. So clearly, like,
Right.
her suspicions are justified, but her actions are not.
Yeah. Yeah. And plus, there'd be a heavy bill on his air conditioning too.
Well, and then we also find out that he's done some unauthorized renovations in his home
Oh yeah,
later
yeah,
on.
yeah, yeah.
So I mean, that is something. I mean, I know many landlords. My own landlord included. Is that if you try to modify your apartment structurally in any way, they get very upset, because if that gets caught by, say, a building inspector and it doesn't meet code, not only are you the tenant responsible, but the landlord is as well, because they're not supposed to allow those types of things to happen. So yeah, I felt that was kind of funny, and it reminded me of something that was way more like logically convenient,
Mm-hmm.
used in a television show from the 60s called Batman, where Barbara Gordon's apartment has actually a built-in secret room in the back of it that was done deliberately by the building owner. Like, and everybody in the building knows it's there. They just don't know what it's used for, because Batgirl has outfitted it to also have a disguise inside. Like, it's just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. We have this secret door in a bunch of these apartment buildings, and there's actually a whole episode that involves Barbara walking into the secret room, and there's a janitor in there who's changing a light bulb or fixing something, because the neighbors downstairs kept on complaining of the noise every time the door would swing, and it was too loud. So he's like, I just came here to
Right, right.
make it silent, and she's just like, oh, okay. So I mean, it's mockery, of course, because why would this be in an apartment building? But the fact that, everyone that owns the building knows it exists, they just don't know the use for it, I thought was kind of really funny, because it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Where in Chris's apartment, he's got a secret compartment, and it's definitely not something that was there in existence. And it just seems so out of. It just didn't.
Well,
I just didn't buy
structurally,
it.
just if you're thinking of an engineering aspect of it, to having a space like that in a wall in an apartment building, someone had to know that he was cutting something out, that the wall has gotten thin. Either that or he built an entire new false wall that extended into the existing room by a foot and a half. It just, nah, it didn't,
It
nah.
and that itself, it's really hard to go unnoticed doing that.
Right, right.
What are you gonna say?
And the
Like, oh, I'm putting
landlord
together
definitely
IKEA
would have been in there
furniture?
with that
Like,
noise.
so I mean, there's just all these type of ideas are thrown in here, and separately they would be cool, but when you connect them together, they just don't hold water. It's just really off, because it's like, okay, are we coming back to Gonzalez? How is she going to pay off now that we've shown Chris's apartment and his living conditions? And his apartment doesn't look, it's not very elaborate, but you'd think maybe he would probably want to live either in a private residency or maybe a gated community, given his success rate and the money. But no,
Right,
it's just a general, kind of typical neighborhood apartment complex with a nosy landlord.
right.
So it just felt like it felt like there should be a reason why Chris prefers this place over something that he would have objectively a little bit more control over, right?
Well, and for a movie too, I think and most movies are like this. I can't say there's very few perfect movies, if any, but there are one or two things that can be forgivable. Little things that you can overlook. Okay, I'll let that one slide. But when it happens over and over and over again, it
They add
it
up,
became
yeah.
laughable really quick.
Oh no, it adds up like a Jenga tower, and eventually, it's gonna tip over. Um, Now, I mean, after we get through like Mrs. Gonzalez and her nosiness, and I guess we get introduced to the cat that
Right.
Chris has. We then he makes the decision that he's going to go and have the meeting with this new client who goes by the name of Noah, and he goes through this fancy like I guess a members club of sort. Like it's really it's not a specific building. It's not anyone's private property. It's like no, this is
Right.
a general private members club only, and that's
And it
where
had kind of like a false facade too, didn't it?
yeah,
Like you had to know it was there.
exactly. And the other part too is like so this is your first red flag is like okay he's meeting a client not in his place of work but in his place of recreation,
Hmm.
and it's like well that's odd. And then so Chris he goes into this private chamber like a library of sorts where Chris is meets Noah, who's this kind of 40s strong-willed kind of dignified, a lot of very expensive clothes. And then in the corner is sitting like his assistant Leon, who's just like on the laptop just typing away. And it's really suspicious atmosphere, but they're exchanging drinks, and Noah seems to know a lot about Chris, and he's saying like, "Yeah, this is my job. We're working with Kinetic Enterprises. I designed an unbreakable security system over there, and I want to hire you to make sure that it is unbreakable, so that I can, stroke my own ego and impress the boss
Hmm.
with my system." And Noah's got one apprehension. It's a very valid one. He's like, well, if you're saying your thing is unbreakable and I don't break into it, that ruins my impressive track record of always breaking into everything, which could hurt my reputation. And Noah's like, I understand that. That's why I'm going to pay you $5 million so that you have that one blemish comes with a price that you at least benefit from. And it's funny because it goes on to say with Noah, I'm not actually like the one that's contracting you. I'm part of a third party that we're contracted to. So we have these degrees of separation where, as I was reading, I'm like, well, clearly this guy does not actually belong or is really in contract with this company in question,
Right.
um, because it's all just so um, the chain of command is not really there. The chain of custody with regards to the operations is completely being avoided and sidestepped based on the fact that Noah is offering him a massive amount of money, like 10 times what he'd normally make.
Yeah. And if I think a reasonable business person or someone who was into that type of thing, the first thing you would think, well, why so much? Doesn't matter the size of the company. There has to be a reason that there's that much. And how do I validate that this is an actual third party company working for them? Because it's very suspect. If it was the actual company and they had proof that it was the actual company that was requesting this, and that's one thing. But a third party company saying, hey, you know what? We're doing this on behalf of the other person. The first thing I would think any reasonable person is prove it
Yeah,
that you're not a thief and you're making me
an
a co-conspirator.
yeah, co-conspirator or an unwitting participant.
Right.
Um, I mean, that's what was kind of going through my head, and it's like this is too early in the script for me to be having these thoughts of doubt. Like
Yep.
it's too on the nose. It's too there. I
Yep.
mean, the other part is when Chris asks, "Well, what is the objective? Like, what am I taking?" And Noah's like, "Well, that's just if I tell you, that takes all the fun out of it, don't you think?" And he's just like, um, so he's just doing recon, and then he brings in like acronyms like OSINT, like which I don't have no idea what's supposed to be, but he's talking about like, yeah, I usually figure out what their operating system is, then their security operations center, then checking their security controls, network architecture. Like he's throwing out these very broad terms that are definitely digestible to your average audience, especially like those born within like between 1989 and 1995. Like they'll
Hmm.
understand this terminology pretty easily. But he's we're getting this other lingo that the context is a little off, and I feel like it's the writer trying to oversell what he may have researched or what he may have figured out through a cursory search, um, because oddly enough, like I have a little bit of experience. I've gone to enclosed sets. I've gone to tech companies. who you would feel like airport security is considered light compared to the stuff that you have to go through
Right.
with these companies here.
Right.
And I just don't feel like I'm being pulled into that level of detail and scrutiny in this conversation. Because ideally what you would have to say, ideally what you have here is Noah would be like, well, he's basically what he's describing. What Noah describes is essentially just a mainframe network, which means it's completely isolated from the rest of the world. It doesn't have any cloud connections, but it holds all this data that's really important. And part of me is wondering, like, okay, when I hear a premise of that nature, it usually tells me, oh, this is a research and development team where everything is in-house, everything is being done inside whatever this location is. Because if you don't have internet connectivity, if you have no external broadcasting of their data or links to other data, it's all coming in essentially physically, then yeah, it's already got a heck of a set of security. But we kind of learn that this company, Kinetic Enterprises, is essentially its own version of like a Twitter and Facebook hybrid, like some sort of
Right.
middle ground, which means
Right.
that it has to be connected to the internet. It can't be an isolated system. And so this whole idea of like, okay, it's not on the cloud, but everything that you're describing about the system says it's a mainframe, and mainframes don't connect to internet because that's anathema to what a mainframe is.
Right. Right. Yeah, I have a son who works in high security like this, so it kind of hit home in some of the things I was talking about him. But I think one of the biggest things is he should have known, and this was the deadest giveaway out of any of these. When they are, if you have a Pentester or what have you that is called to infiltrate a company, it is so contrary to most business models, even certain laws, that the Pentester actually downloads company information. They could upload saying, hey, tag, I'm it, I got in,
Mm-hmm.
there you go, I know your security. But to actually allow them to download any type of material, let alone sensitive material, is completely unheard of. Don't matter who's checking your security. So that um, yeah, at that point, I already knew most of the plot. It was just, yeah, yeah, this is too easy. This is
This is
way too easy to see through.
clearly, yeah, it's clearly not normal because I think the terminology is that their goal is to deliver a package, and the deliver a package is basically saying, oh, it's a random file. You open it up, it says, I just broke into your thing. Thank you so
Right,
much for your service. Feel
right,
free to delete this file, and my report will be sent to you post haste. Blah blah blah.
yep,
But that's not what we get here. We get a guy in Chris who's actually stealing information, and then he returns it. But the mere fact that that information was downloaded, copied, what have you, and it left the premises, and
yep,
between the time it left the premises and the time it was returned, anything could have happened to that. It could have been copied, it could have been sold on the black market, all those types of things that no pen tester should be doing because it compromises the integrity and the security of what their position is in relation to their client.
right,
So this is where the story kind of collapses a little bit, which is the fact that the writer has a cursory understanding of what the job is that he is trying to sell us on, and he doesn't know it better than a couple of other writers right now in
yeah,
this thing, as they understand it.
yep.
Um,
Saw a couple movies, maybe Googled a few things, but that was about it.
exactly, like he's looking at the pen tester as if it's the same type of a ransomware guy. Like he just does ransomware. All the only difference is that he returns it, and that's not how it
Right,
works at all. Um,
right,
and this goes into like one of my favorite lessons, which is write what you know and know what you write, which means that if you're going to experiment or tell a story in a field of study that you really, really like, but you don't know everything, you have to learn as much of it as possible so that when you do execute it, the brilliant experts of that particular field that you're telling a story about are convinced that you actually know your job, know what you're doing, and you're convincing them to the point where they're not saying, well, that would never happen in my office, that never happens in my industry, that doesn't happen in that way. Because even though they may be the smaller part of the audience, by and large, they're the ones that they'll tell their friends about that. And then their
hmm
friends will roll their eyes. It's like, oh, just let it be entertaining. It's like, yeah, well, I wanted it to, but I how can you be entertained by someone that is selling you a lie on a fictional story? Like, there's no verisimilitude in the story when it falls apart on the basic logics of, okay, well, this is just not how that system works. And
See, that's why I never watch any of the doctor dramas or doctor TVs because they'll have things on there and then they'll be in an emergency room and I'll see the x-rays upside down and they're reading things backwards and the
oh yeah,
prognosis for different things. Like they had a Bones episode where it was all on Valley Fever and Valley Fever doesn't cause a whole hazmat shutdown. It's just ridiculous stuff. And with something like a Pentester, you can go to most people will realize this isn't how it's done. It doesn't have to be even a specialist.
mm-hmm. And this is basically where you're kind of biting off more than you can chew, or boxing outside of your weight class.
Hmm.
Where, because I will say this, I think the premise is a very reliable one. It's easy to digest. It's Chris
Yep.
is being set up. Um, the question is why, and I don't even really understand if that's truly answered in this screenplay.
No, and I think that was we won't get into the end of it, but at the very end, I think that's why he did that, hoping that something will come of this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that they'd have another Mission Impossible franchise or something on that end.
That is definitely what's being set up here, because certain players are done. Like, there's an Italian job aspect to it. There's a fugitive job aspect to it.
Yep.
In fact, let's get into the fugitive aspect of it, because um, this goes into further why it's very important to kind of know the the fields of employment that the characters you bring into your story have. So we have Chris, who he takes the job. He's like, I'm going to break into this whole Kinetic Enterprises company. He does so by, this is where I was like, this is very weird. He does so by doing a Google search on the employees at Kinetic Enterprises, and he finds one woman named Gwen, who has a bunch of social media, has her position listed on LinkedIn. Again, another thing that high security tech companies don't do is they don't actually allow your employees to
Right.
share that information on social media or on LinkedIn. They actually have like what's called a proxy. So if you're working for, say, Elon Musk in some regard, especially in tech security, you might be working for Elon Musk, but it might be a completely different department than listed publicly than what you actually do. And that's specifically so people in regards to corporate espionage can't find you
Right.
and prey on you. And you are told that to be, it's like, this is how you advertise yourself on social media with regards to your career and your day. And anything about outside of this will compromise your security clearance, and you may no longer be working for the company as a result. Like, those are your basic parameters. So he finds this Gwen working at the gym, follows her for a bit, and then here's another part where I realized, oh, this guy doesn't even know anything about cars,
Yeah,
because
I was gonna get to this.
so okay, then I'm gonna throw it to you, because please go right ahead.
Okay. Well, you think of Gordon at the beginning where he does this setup in order to get the information and he calls it what is it? Social engineering,
Yes.
where he plays a person bit by bit until he can get what he needs. Well, he decides to do it with this Gwen. And the way he does it is he has a car, has the hood open, there's steam coming off the engine, and he's sitting there and she pulls up to help him out. And then one here is, and I'm not being stereotypes, but it's an adult man with a car on the side of the road. And I don't know any woman in their right mind that would pull over and say, "Hey, do you need some help?" It just in this world, it's especially in DC.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, or around there, I don't know of anyone that would do that, but she does. And they immediately go with a car that is steaming, get out jumper cables.
Right.
That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
No,
It
because
just,
if you're steaming, you're overheated, like the
you're
radiator.
right.
You're missing water, or you've got a crack in your engine block.
Right? Or you had
Jumper
a belt
cables aren't helping
fire or
you out of
something
that.
else, but it's not your battery.
It's not the battery. And if your battery is smoking, get the heck away from the car. So
Well, that was just too funny.
I was like, this is. I mean, here's the other part too. The writer may have realized that didn't make sense, because of what he tries to do later on. But yeah, like this part, I just didn't buy it because even in DC or even anywhere, mostly in the United States, at least in my experience, if you're stuck on the side of the road, even if you're a guy and your head's under the hood, at least a couple of other guys are going to pull over and ask if you need help,
Mm-hmm.
or if you have you called like AAA or something, just to check in, just to be a good Samaritan of sorts. It's in the culture, and it would. And you're right. I don't think it would ever really be a woman, even one who's described as trying to be altruistic with her social media stuff. I don't buy it, but there's like the writer does bring in a reason why this particular woman does stop to help him.
Mm-hmm.
It's really contrived.
Oh, yeah, this whole thing is really contrived. How quick a relationship sets it between there because of uh, them going home together. It just, yeah, no, 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 no. That just, if any of you have, um, I would say sisters, wives, what have you, and my wife would tell you the same thing. There are so many for a woman, the danger flags that go up. And especially if you're single and something like that happens, people disappear.
Oh yeah.
You're right about guys because I gave my truck to my son because I don't drive anymore. But I always had jumper cables, emergency equipment, tow equipment, and I helped people all the time. But almost always, if it was a woman, unless they were stuck in the snow, almost always they would say, "No, I called somebody. Thanks for," they wouldn't, even if I could help them. It was there just too many dangers, and I understood that.
Mm-hmm.
But this relationship just took off way too easy.
Yeah, because really what we got here, we have like a Buffalo Bill situation, right? Like, oh, there's a guy in distress. Woman stops. Okay, this is where she gets kidnapped, right? Like
Hmm.
that's the situation that should be going through many women's minds whenever they're
Hmm.
seeing a man in distress in something like that situation. I mean, ideally, what you'd want if you still had a heart is you can slow to a stop, don't get out of the car, roll down the window a crack, and be like, "Hey, do you need help? Can I call someone for you?" And that's about as far as it goes. and
Right.
and then you get out because you just can't be you can't take that risk. But yeah, so these two they
Especially
managed
with
to
a
hit
car
it
that needs
off.
a jump, but that's smoking.
It's smoke. Yeah, so they hook up the jumper cables, and Chris is trying the engine. Eventually, it turns over. He's like, "Hello, it's alive. Great. I owe you a drink." And she's like, "Well, no, it's fine. I'm just being nice." It's like, "Well, let me at least repay it back." And she just this happens way too often where she basically says, "Yeah, okay, I get off work at 7. Great." And then we cut to them at a bar, and they're drinking, and then she has to leave, and she gives him a peck on the cheek, and then he pulls out from his pocket the duplicate lanyard that he made with his RFID reader,
Hmm.
and then he goes into this state of the art secure building where he's able to pick the lock like it's nothing and walk them through, and there's nothing
That's just the thing.
there's
Could you
nothing
imagine going into X headquarters or Facebook headquarters with just a copied lanyard? How far do you think you'd get?
maybe
It wouldn't
maybe
happen.
to the first set of elevators past the lobby, and that's
Right.
it.
Right.
And that might be enough for some people, and that would have been clever if it was like, this is only going to get you to the elevators, like that's all I need. And then he breaks through the elevator, he's in the shaft, and he's walking through the elevator shafts or what have you. And like, I would have liked something interesting and different of that nature, because I think the only thing we really get told in the script is that he puts on like his night vision goggles, and he's able to see the motion detector grid, and apparently it's like it covers everything to the point where he can't even go through that room. And because the building's isolated from the internet, they can't break in, they can't shut it off or clone, loop a cycle so that they can run on repeat. So he just bypasses that, and by going through another corridor or whatnot, and then eventually goes through the vents, and then he gets inside, the server room, and he pulls out a hard drive, which it's described as like a larger hard drive, but we end up finding
Hmm.
out only a couple pages later it's the size of a thumb drive, which means that at most, what's the biggest thumb drive you can get on the market? Like what, 3, 4 terabytes? Like not a
Yeah,
lot.
see, that was something I was confused at. I don't even know how much they can actually hold. Where the first job, he did have a external drive, a whole solid state, a large drive that could probably hold 2, 3 terabytes. But a thumb drive, I have no idea.
Yeah. So this kind of threw me off, and then this goes back into the reality of it. It's like, well, you don't steal data, you leave something there to show that you made it in. Um, so he's basically he's in the process of taking the data, and then he gets a call from Noah saying like, how goes it? He's like, yeah, I'm just doing it right now. And then before he finishes a sentence, Noah hangs up, and Chris doesn't think anything of it. He finishes the job, and Maria's coaching him through the next steps and teasing him about how much he might like that Gwen girl. He's like, I'm not thinking about it, what have you, blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden he hears a window break, and the other part that's kind of interesting is no alarm goes off, which is
Right,
weird, right? Window breaks. You think an alarm would go off because this is
right.
supposed to be the most secure building and on the planet. Like they didn't shut off the alarms; he just got around them. So he goes to investigate, and of course, Marina's like, don't just get out of there. And he's just like, no, I'm gonna check it out because curiosity, which was never a character flaw presented prior to Chris, which could have been in that first moment, in that first
Right.
thing where he's like, oh, he hears a noise. What is it? Oh, it's a mouse. He's like,
But it is
okay,
kind of counterintuitive because at the beginning I said he was afraid of things.
right. And now he's like, curiosity, glass breaks. He should be afraid. And he should be like, yeah, I'm getting the heck out of here. She's like, no, you got to
Right.
finish the job. We need that $5 million. Like, I don't want to know. There's someone else is here. It's like, obviously someone else is here. It's night security. Just, they probably screwed up. They're probably sweeping it, like, come up with excuses to try and keep them there. Try and make things difficult for your main character instead of making them easy. But either way, um, we have Chris. He goes to investigate what the broken glass is. We don't see where the broken glass is or anything of that nature. But what we do find is like in this big office full of cubicles, the owner of Kinetic Enterprises, Milton Metcalf, who's kind of like Elon Musk meets Mark Zuckerberg, the balance between them, if you will. He's been stabbed in the abdomen. There's a knife in his body, in his chest there, and he's just trying to speak, and the only words he kind of lets out are the most cliche, behind you. And that's where
Right.
this guy with a flashlight who shines it in Chris's eyes tries to open fire on him. And they duck away. There's a big commotion. They're knocking down tables, cubicle walls. um, I think they go through another glass window and then fall onto like the next story below or something of that nature. And and then all of a sudden the police have shown up and the FBI have surrounded the building, and they're all freaking out, and like hands up. And now we get into this foot race where Maria has now cut comms. We can't hear her anymore, and Chris is all alone, and he's basically from crashing through the glass window. He's got like a shard of glass sticking out of his arm, and and he's trying to stay ahead of the police until they finally capture him. And then we do a smash cut to an interrogation room where he's basically in like police issue clothes, like a shirt, and then his elbow wound is bandaged up. And we meet our two FBI sergeants, Rodriguez and Kelly. And what did you think about this so-called interrogation scene?
Um, all right. Now the way he describes it, it just kills me. It's a typical old style cop thing,
Mm-hmm.
and they have him handcuffed to a table. And if you've seen a lot of these, especially someone who isn't known to be dangerous, except even in murder cases, um, they don't necessarily have him handcuffed to a table, maybe to a wall, or they're just sitting there in a secure room, but they have him handcuffed to a table. And in come the two sergeants who calls the one Sarge. I just thought the name thing was really funny, very awkward. It's not a good cop, bad cop thing. It's a one idiot, two idiot thing, and they're supposed to be FBI.
Yeah.
And they start doing their little interrogation of him, and he's claiming innocence, and yet they see, oh well, you were there, you got blood on you, there was this, there was that. And so Chris decides, okay, I'm gonna make a ploy to make an escape. And so he falls on the floor and pretends to be having a panic attack. The problem is he was chained to the table. There's no struggle with that. There's nothing. He just laying on his back. Oh, let's mosey on over and get someone who can give him medical attention. And
And
yeah,
they
that was
both
written
go
very
like
poorly.
they both leave the room to go get someone to give him medical attention,
Yep.
but instead of
No
one
one
staying
stayed there to
behind.
watch.
So this is another example of the writer helping his main character out of a bad situation. In addition, we learn things that I think are quite ridiculous, and that is Chris, the sergeant, the FBI officers, they say, "Oh, your fingerprints are on the murder weapon," and that makes me ask myself, well, wait a minute. Does that mean that Chris was not wearing gloves when he was performing his industrial espionage? Because that would
Right.
kind of be a key component to being a pen tester, to break in, to not leave any trace behind other than what you deliberately need to, which means you should be wearing gloves so that you're not leaving fingerprints. You should be wearing, like, because he's wearing an all black outfit and he's wearing like a Nationals baseball cap to cover his eyes, and sometimes he'll put on a
Yep.
fake disguise. So he's going the full nine to make sure he can't be identified. Gloves are like your first step in that. I mean,
You would think.
you would think but that's the case. Like, we find out, no, he didn't. He wasn't wearing gloves during this job, which is foolish, because how could he have a perfect track record and be so great at his job if he's breaking into these places and leaving his fingerprints behind? Now, regardless of the most recent development in fingerprint technology, being that fingerprints are not as unique as people once assumed, because they actually have found that there's people all over the world that have similar fingerprints of other people. So while it is rare, it is entirely possible that you could be in Milan, and there could be a criminal with your identical fingerprints operating in California, and because maybe you had your fingerprints registered for some security check, the police might investigate you, or Interpol might be investigating you in Milan for a crime that you didn't commit because you're on the other side of the planet, but someone had the exact same fingerprints as you, because fingerprints are not as unique as we once thought.
Right. Right.
And
And then there was the whole thing of him being able to get out a lock picking device for his handcuffs. But now handcuffs have the double locking system where it locks them in and prevents them from opening. And then there's a second lock where it prevents them from moving, period. To be able to manipulate both of those in the amount of time, or even just get one of them with a hand lockpick, it was kind of, it was very unrealistic.
where he did he get that lockpick? From the watch he was wearing, which he wouldn't be wearing at that point, because if they already
Yep.
removed his clothes
Yep.
for evidence, they'd be removing his watch as well. They'd be giving him temporary shoes because he's considered a suspect, and
Yep.
he's at an active murder scene, which means that he cannot be released. They have to hold him at least for, I mean, between 24 and 48 hours is what they have before they have to issue charges. So everything
And
is,
they even had taken a shirt and given him a different one, so they knew what he had or what he could have
yes.
had.
So the mere fact that they changed his clothes means that everything that he came in wearing originally should have been locked up as part of evidence
Yep.
during that investigative window before they actually start issuing charges. So it just made me laugh that they would, again, it's, you're making your antagonist incompetent to favor the side of your protagonist. And then we get the next part here, which he breaks out, and he manages to find a jacket on a coat hanger, and then a hat and sunglasses. He puts that on, and then some other criminal is being harangued, and that criminal recognizes that Chris is clearly not an officer or an FBI agent,
Right.
but for somehow
And he doesn't have shoes that fit the job.
apparently doesn't have shoes that fit the job, but for some strange reason decides, I'm going to help this guy out just because. Like, that's it. He's basically says, I'm going to start a bigger ruckus so that all the agents will have their eyes on me and not on this guy who I've never met before, never seen before. I just think he should go. And I'm like, that is, you don't do that. If anything, you have the guy in the seat being harangued saying, hey, who is that dude? Isn't he supposed to be behind in cuffs too? Like,
Right.
why aren't you looking at him? He's clearly not supposed to be wearing that jacket. And what are those shoes? Those are the shoes you put me in. Like, he should be calling him out so that it services his internal
Yep.
goal, which we don't need to know. We just need to know that he clearly doesn't want to be here, and he's going to say anything he can to achieve that.
Some kind of leniency.
And that's going to compromise Chris's goal, which is his goal to escape. Like, that's That's good drama. But no, it's like, nope, these two guys are going to cooperate with each other as if they're giving some sort of brotherly nod and like, yeah, man, us crooks got to stick together. But Chris is not a crook. He shouldn't be even assumed as such.
I need to clip that. But no.
But no, yeah. So, I mean, it's really, it's just really ridiculous. But he manages to get out. Not only does he get out, he leaps out like a second-story window, lands on a car, and yeah, isn't really too hurt by that. So he's got some superpowers.
Well, in all fairness, that one didn't seem as far-fetched to me. And his second story, he had talked about him manipulating the glass and everything, and if he was able to hang from it before he dropped, it wouldn't be too hard of a drop. He could probably hurt from it if he's an athlete, maybe a little, and run it off. But if he was an overweight person and decided to do that, it could break a leg or something. But so that one wasn't that bad. But even still, it's just too many coincidences.
Yeah, I mean, and it was all just to favor Chris, and then the other part too is like as he's so this is weird. So I've lived in DC for a number of weeks over many years. Actually, I'd be visiting there for various little smaller productions and whatnot, and so I have never heard this, but when at night is there people rushing the streets to go to work in DC, like? Is that a new thing, like recently? Because
I've been there, and there's never anybody out in D.C. unless they're on Washington Street where they're going to the pubs.
Yeah, like going to the bar, getting off work, I understand. But in the script here, it's like, no, they're going to work.
Yeah,
and
no,
I'm
I
just
don't.
like, what? Like at night? Like, I mean,
right.
I know there's a lot of quote unquote horrors in Washington, but that's not really what I'm thinking of here. Given all the pedestrians that are milling around on the streets that, Chris is managing to get lost in so that he doesn't get caught. So, yeah, it threw me off because I'm just like, this
Another
guy
thing, too,
know.
he used that crowd. Oh, I'm jumping the scene. Never mind. I'm thinking. We'll get to that
spill
one.
it out. We can always bounce back. It's okay.
No, it was when he was being chased by Clive, I think.
Oh yeah. Clive.
And
that's the guy who blinded him and killed the Elon Musk clone.
Right. But it's a similar type scene, and he runs into a crowd, and then in order to get away, he yells "bomb," and in my experience, if someone yelled bomb, it used to be people would duck.
Yeah.
Or hide. Nowadays, people grab their phones out. And it's the weirdest thing, but it wouldn't work. People would instantly start grabbing their phones and start trying to catch that little glimpse of something that they could sell later on.
Number of reasons. It's whether they'll capture the explosion or they'll capture the person that set it off or they'll capture the person that called it out, right? So that it could be used either for themselves for personal gain or if they're a little altruistic to capture the aggressive party. You're absolutely right because now that technology is there, they might duck, but as they're ducking, they're pulling out their phone and they're recording whatever they can. So there's a record of it.
And I watch them all the time where there's could be anything from mild to horrible things, and the person's going to stand there with the camera. Where 30 years ago, you're either running to help or you're running away. There's no, I'm going to stand in place and just watch it happen. But that's what they do now.
It is. And you know what's kind of crazy is that some of the timing on these people that record those videos is amazing. It's like sometimes it's like, why are they recording a good 30 seconds before the event actually happens? What else were they doing at that time? Was it like, were they doing a TikTok and then all of a sudden they heard something and they just flipped their camera around and be like, boom, there we go. I don't know, but it is miraculous. But so jumping back a little bit, Chris is on the lam, and he doesn't go to Maria's apartment. He ends up going to a completely other complex, and by finding another crazy baseball cap and then an empty box in the trash, and then reforming it to look normal, manages to convince another tenant at this apartment to let him in because he's trying to drop off a package at this late hour at night. And the guy's like, yeah, sure, whatever. And I'm just shocked again. It's like, why is it so easy? If anything, if I wanted to make it difficult, Um, I'd probably have him sitting at the corner across the street, or at least on the same block, like a few meters away, and just keeping an eye on that door so that when it does open and the guy goes in, he can catch it with his foot and then just sneak in that way. Because then you can say, oh, there's an elapsed time, right? He's waiting. No one's going to expect him to go to this building or whatever. We don't even really know why he's here. We find out a beat later that it's Maria's uncle's apartment, and he happens to know that she's going to be there, even though he made no effort to check her actual home to see that she's gone. So that was kind of weird. He took one big assumption, um, that when he lost contact with her, she then hightailed it out. Uh, so
And before we get too far into that, there's two. It would have made two scenes far more interesting. And I was going to bring it up earlier,
okay,
but it would
go,
have
yeah,
been this one
please.
as well. When he was doing the original Pentester into the kinetic, or when he's going to Marie, it should have been he actually used some skills where instead of breaking into the company proper, he was able to get into physical network. Some of the wires are different things on different floors and be able to hook in that way. Or with Maria's place, just go to the power grid and open up the door there.
Mm-hmm.
Shut the power off. You'll be able to get in because it does the emergency where people can escape if they need to, and it just go right in. But yeah. I'm gonna fold a cardboard box that was sitting in this trash can. It could be soaked with beer and soggy.
Or
Yeah, I,
grab a fire escape, climb up to the roof, go into the power box there, trigger a fire
yep,
alarm, get everybody out
yep,
of the building. You know,
yep. And
something that
catch her when
shows
she
that
comes
he's
out.
using he's using this kind of like social engineering skill, very flippantly, and it's working way too easily for things that don't work in a very skeptic society that we kind of have, especially if you're in Washington D.C., where nobody likes to believe anything's coming out of anybody's mouth in that town. I
True.
mean,
And usually when people meet or want to talk to, it's over some type of Facebook or internet connection or over the phone and face-to-face things. Even if you are doing this social engineering, it doesn't come that easy because people aren't used to it anymore.
right? That interaction is a little bit on the rare side, comparatively. So
Hmm.
so he manages to get in. He talks to Maria, and she's just like, yeah, I got out of there. This is what happened to me. Someone came up from behind me with a gun. I threw coffee in his face, and I managed to get away. I'm like, oh, God, that's cliche.
Yep.
Uh, and then I've been hiding here ever since. And then she makes a remark like, sometimes you just don't see what's in front of you, which is weird because it's like this is the first time we're bringing that up. And then we have quite possibly the dumbest thing I have read in a script in a very long time, and that is a red
Yep.
dot appears on Maria's chest and then slowly goes up to her forehead. And instead of Chris pushing her out of the way, recognizing that it could be something dangerous, he turns around to try and find where the source of the red dot is coming from. And lo and behold, she is shot in the face with her brain matter spraying onto the wall. And it it's just so dumb. Like it's like the
Maybe he
most
spent too
cliche.
much time with his cat. It's a red dot. Let's play with it.
Yes, maybe. I don't know. It's just you see like any person between the ages of 10 and 80 who sees a red dot suddenly appear on someone is going to grab them and get them out of the way before they turn around to find out what the source of that dot is. Because you just don't know. It's a clear tell. Like that is clearly the sight of a sniper who actually kind of wants to know that you're there. Because a great sniper doesn't, I think, need a laser pointer
Right.
for it. The scope does what they need it to do. So I think it would have been more shocking, at least for myself. If I was to write this scene, I wouldn't even have the laser pointer dot. I would just have her head suddenly explode,
Yep.
because that's just like, oh crap, that's a professional sniper that's taking pot shots at us. He killed her, and maybe I would have him even wing or at least get him in the leg or the hip or something, just to show that the sniper's trying to account for the crazy reaction that Chris is going to have as a result of seeing his possible would-be, maybe not girlfriend just killed in front of him. And then another guy busts into the room, and this is Clive again.
Yep.
And he shoots the uncle, and Chris manages to break out of that apartment, and he goes on the run again, and now he's running. And where does he go? Well, he goes to Gwen, because he needs someone, and the way that he gets her is, again, another cliche. He sneaks up behind her and puts his hand over her mouth and says, "Don't scream."
Yeah.
and I did skip over something, which I apologize. So he does manage to steal the information on the thumb drive, and then he hides it in the owner's office underneath the carpet. Like, he pulls up the carpet, he puts the thumb drive in there, and he puts the carpet back down.
Yep, right after he found the murder at Kinetic. Yep.
Right after he found the murder, and right before all that scuffle occurs. And now he's like, okay, I've got Gwen. I need you to go into your office, to your boss's office, and grab that thumb drive, because that's got the evidence that will prove that I'm not the murderer. Which, I'm like, okay, maybe, I don't know if it really does, because it only proves that you stole evidence from there, and maybe the owner caught you, and that's why you killed him. Like, if anything, it doesn't really help his case.
Right.
But we're told by the scripture that it's supposed to help his case. And before they even decide to go and commit this, this retrieval of information, Gwen takes Chris back to her place, and they just decide they make love all night. Quote from the screenplay: "They make love all night." Yep. And it's like, dude, your partner, who may have been your girlfriend, just died a few hours ago, and now you're boinking this other chick. It's kind of showing how much you valued that partnership, that you're going to that distance so quickly.
Very shallow guy.
He's not a character that I like. Like, that's the problem. It's like, all right, now, because of his behaviors, because of his actions here, we now have a character who, for the little charm that we're able to see, it doesn't off-balance the bad behavior and the selfishness that we've seen up until this point. He's not James Bond. He's not the guy with the witty retort. He's not seducing the women by complimenting them. And when, a woman that he seduced dies, he doesn't take that moment to reflect on it and show a little bit of, like, his humanity breaking there. Because even every James Bond, when a woman has died in front of them, he responds to it, especially if it's the woman he likes, as opposed to, like, the one that keeps trying to kill him. He responds to it as, like, she's an innocent. His license to kill does not involve, is to protect, the public and the citizens of Britain. And when one dies, especially one that he liked and fancied, it hurts him. It's the only time you really see Bond when something gets under his skin. Chris does not have that trait or demonstrate that trait in any capacity at all.
Right. No, not with anyone either.
No.
Even when you find out a little bit more about his family history, it was very shallow.
Actually, we can kind of touch a little bit on that, because this is happening. So, like, the FBI has lost Chris, and they decide, and then this is where we get back to Chris's apartment. So Chris goes back to his place. I don't know why, because he doesn't really pick up any gear, if I recall correctly.
Check on his cat.
Yeah, I check on his cat, and the police show up at his place, and this is where we talked about earlier, where he either modified his apartment by tearing down a wall and rebuilding it, or adding on another wall, because he goes into this crawl space behind a one-way mirror so he can see people inside, and it turns out, well, it's not the police that have shown up. It's Clive and this other guy, and that's Leon. And that's when we realized Clive and Leon and Noah are actually the guys that have set him up and are doing this thing. We get this scene where Clive looks at the mirror, and he gets a sense that there's something going on there because the cat is scratching at it. He then draws his gun and holds it at the mirror right where Chris's head would be on the other side. And instead of Chris, like, ducking, he just stands there.
Right.
until police sirens show up, and Leon's like, "Oh, the 5-0 are here. We got to get out." And I'm just thinking, why doesn't he just squeeze the trigger anyways and then run, and maybe, problem solved? And he's just making a break for it because clearly they have enough time to get away where the cops don't see him. And again, a gunshot is what, a tenth of a second.
Right.
So he
But
can at least
Chris
do
does have a
one.
history of standing still when there's guns pointed at him.
Exactly. Whether they know it or not, it's still a possibility. He's like, let's just shoot the window. Let's just shoot the mirror. Why not? But anyways, they get out, and then the cops show up, and it's the FBI again. And then the FBI, grab the cat, and what have you, and they search around, and then they leave. And then that's when Chris encounters Gwen. They do the nasty, and then that morning he's set up in a coffee shop with his laptop and an earpiece, talking with Gwen, walking her through her own office building to get the thumb drive. When even one of the FBI agents is like, "Hey, what are you doing in here? This is a secured area." And she's like, "Oh yeah, my boss had me drop this off. I just figured
That made no sense at all.
take it." And the FBI agent's like, "What do you mean take?" Like, he should be saying, "What do you mean take stuff? You shouldn't be in here at all. Whatever it is you have, you give it to me so that we can, because it might be evidence with regards to his murder."
Right.
Like, that's
And
the
other
logical thing. Go ahead.
Right. And she's in the guy's office, and the cleaning person comes, even though there's FBI there trying to pick up evidence. And this cleaning person comes in, empties a trash can with the vacuum, and doesn't see her under the desk.
Yeah, all of that stuff doesn't hold up at all, because even if it's been like 36 hours since they arrived on the scene for the murder, most of that floor would be cordoned off.
Yep.
No one would be allowed on it. Even if you were high up in security, you still wouldn't be allowed in there without extreme escort. And every single, they probably would be tearing down the walls and ripping up the carpet to see if anything was there, because they have to figure out, like, well, why was it? They'd take it in for fiber evidence at the very least, right? It's like cut out sections or what have you. So, yeah, lots of unbelievable aspects are coming here. So Gwen, she gets her thumb drive. Everything is all good. She makes it outside, and then a black van comes up and snatches her off the road, takes off, and then the FBI agent follows. For some reason, exits as well, following out Gwen, maybe because he suspects something finally after just giving her what she wanted. And he's looking across the street, and he sees Chris in the cafe, and they exchange eye contact, and then he just runs across the street. But Chris has enough time to pack up his gear into his backpack and hightail it out of there before this guy gets here. And then we're into another foot race, and he disappears. And so the FBI agents are like, well, we don't know what to do at this point. Only thing we have is a couple of letters that we found at Chris's apartment from someone named Fred Simpson, and it comes from a correctional facility. And we find out that Chris's dad, Fred, was also a type of internet hacker who has been in jail for like the last decade or so. Mm-hmm. And he basically tells the FBI, "Yeah, listen, I taught my kid everything he knows, and if he doesn't want to be found, you're not going to find him." And the FBI is like, "Well, we caught you." And he's like, no, I gave myself up. But if you want me to help you find him, maybe you can pull some strings and let me out now, and I can physically do that. And instead of the FBI saying, "No, we'll go Silence of the Lambs here. We'll tell you everything we need to know. We know, and then you tell us what to do next, and then we will work in that regard." Like, that would be the logical thing to do. Like, you're staying here, you're staying locked up, and we'll get you some time off, but you're not coming out with us to help find your son. You're going to direct us remotely. But no, it's like, okay, sure, we'll pull some strings. We'll put an ankle collar on you.
And that was another thing, considering who he was, or what we get to find out who he was, what kind of skills he had. There was no way they would have let him out.
No,
not a chance. Even with an ankle bracelet, no way.
No, if they let him out, he would be in a Hannibal Lecter like straitjacket on a dolly. Like, they're not going to take any risks.
We're going to give you $80 and let you go sit in a hotel all by yourself.
Oh God, yeah, that was ridiculous. I mean, the fact of the matter is that they just let him go.
Yep.
Like, and it's again the contrivance here, and And what happens quickly? Well, Fred finds Chris, and he says, "Okay, we're going to go to this bar and talk to Denise, who is
How he
his
found him was funny. Like he takes that $80, goes to the local hardware or what was it, pawn shop,
pawn shop,
buys bits and pieces, and builds a computer.
builds a computer from pawn shop parts, like he's MacGyver." And then he borrows Denise's truck, finds Chris, has him hop in, takes him to Chris's bar, and this is where he learns, like, yeah, the Russians are involved in this because he was trained by Russia. So I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. The Russians recruited a black American and trained him to be a spy, a computer expert hacker spy, in Russia. And you're telling me no one in any of the many alphabet surveillance intelligence agencies were wondering why this black American was spending so much time in Russia, near the Kremlin and all these other places, because they clearly would have
another thing too. Even if they did, if they knew who he was, that's another reason he wouldn't have been where the FBI could have got to him.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like the FBI would have been able to find his name because he was sending letters to his kid. Fair enough, but they would be completely separated by many other leagues of bureaucracies and departments. Yep. And it basically, like, we need a request. Well, that has to go to this other agent, and then that goes to another agent. And even then they'd be like, he's not getting out, but you work through me and we'll coordinate to get this guy. Like, that's basically, or it would be taken from the FBI to a higher department and then they would pursue it. But it's just like, I can see from the writer's perspective, he wants to keep things simple with the character count, which I empathize with, but I think bringing in the FBI is different, where I think something more like NHS might have been, or probably would have been better, or just another alphabet department agency, or made up one if you want to go that way, like how IMF is not the International Monetary Fund, it's the Impossible Mission Force, that type of thing. Like they could have done something that would have afforded me the ability to believe that they are important enough to have the pull to grab this very important asset out before their release date to help them with the current case. But now we get into like exposition territory where we're finding out, Fred is actually way more brilliant than Chris, and he did all these amazing surveillances and hacking and everything like that with another partner. But the reason that Chris and his dad don't get along is because after his mother died of cancer, his dad disappeared and then got arrested and has been in jail ever since. And then we get introduced to other characters, and it just keeps kind of going and going, because we have this what's her name, Andy, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So she runs seminars about social engineering, and I will say this: she does this example with an ISP customer service agent, where somehow she eagerly tricks them into resetting all the passwords of an account that she has no access to, so that she now has access to it. And I worked in customer service. Heck, I've written scripts for people in customer service, and I know for a fact that none of them would ever just capitulate so easily to a person saying, "Oh, sorry, I've got a baby in the background, and my husband, he's at work, but I didn't realize he didn't put me on there when we got married." It's like, well, then I will call your husband and I'll ask him to do that right now, because that's what they would do. I would call the account holder and I would verify this. Hold, please. That is the procedure. But no, this person's like, "Oh, sure, I can take your word for it." I was like, no, nobody. If you do have people that do that at your company, especially when it comes to like private information, internet, phone, banking, what have you, get rid of them. Because all those calls are even recorded, so if they can target you and be like, "Yes, you compromised one of our customers. You're gone. You're out." We have to then contact that customer. We have to backlog everything. We got to fix it. We got to file incident reports with the authorities. All that type of stuff. Things that are rigorously trained in those industries. It just was laughable, because it's never that easy. In fact, actual hackers, actual social engineers, go so hard and fast to the point
Yep.
where they know all the checks and they know how to get around them. They have, like when the AI voice simulator came in, um, they figured out a way to duplicate people's voices, and then when they do call their customer service and they have the voice authentication, it passes, and that's usually what they did, and that's why a lot of customer service companies for those customer service departments for those companies no longer use voice authentication anymore because it can be forged. They go back to the old school stuff, information that shouldn't be publicized online that you have set up yourself for your account that you should know and retain. They will ask you to verify that and do it that way. They'll do all the forms of like the 2 or 3 factor authentication. Um, so yeah, it's just laughable that we have a story about tech and security, and it feels like it's tech and security at the level of like the 1980s when people are still figuring it out.
Yep. Yep. I was just thinking the exact same thing. And that little kid sitting next to him in the auditorium, this is where he puts in or she puts in an artificial sense of speed. She has to get this person off balance because they're in a rush and the baby's gonna cry and this and that. And I'm thinking, no, they could just have him call back later. This
Yeah.
is
Like, I mean, you're not really supposed to be able to get the person on the other end of the phone off balance by saying you're in a rush. It's like, well, if this is not a good time, please call back later. We'll be happy to service you when your things are more under
right.
control. Thank you so much for choosing us and have a wonderful day. Like, all that type of stuff. You can tell that I've written a lot of those types of copy for.
Yeah, quit showing off.
But that's just what it was. So I thought, so we get to this Andy character she's in her 60s, and she's got this nice house and everything. And when Chris says, yeah, my dad sent me to reach out to you, she's like, okay, I'll help you. It's like, why couldn't you just, like, I know it's cliche, but it creates more drama if she says, get away from me, I hate your dad. We used to be
Right.
lovers. He then screwed me when he got arrested, and not in the fun way, and now I've had to claw back out of that line of work to do what I do now, which I hate, all because of him. And give us a chance for something for Chris to do that prays into her empathy, or have fun with the irony, which is he social engineers her to help him by using all of her techniques. And when she realizes that, she's like, okay, damn, you got me. I'll help you. Because play into it. The writer keeps bringing up this social engineering tactic of creating a bond with your mark, but every bond we've had up until this point has been so quick, so short, and just so easy that it's not fun to read.
This would have been another good spot for him to show up Pentester skills too, because he could have went into her information
Mm-hmm.
and almost blackmailed her, say, hey, you're going to help me because this is what I've done to you and what I could release about you, or I really don't want to do this, but help me, Obi-Wan, you're my only hope type thing,
Yeah.
where what he has on her, she has no choice, but instead it's like, oh, please, my dad. Yeah.
Yeah. It was pretty weak. But, they figure out their players. They realize that Noah's not really Noah. His name is Charles, and he's like ex-CIA. And then we have this weird thing where, like, they swat Noah/Charles by having some sort of deep fake photo of a kid in his basement, and then he says, no, it's not real, it's a deep fake. And then the authorities just like shrug their shoulders and say, oh, I guess you're right. And then
Yeah.
just, it's like, no, wouldn't they be bringing him in anyways, and then investigating the authenticity of the photo? Wouldn't they have someone down in his actual basement? Or maybe they could be like, oh wait, your house doesn't have a basement, so clearly this is suspect, but we still have to bring you in to to cover our butts.
Any swatting incidents that you've ever heard of or read about or people talking about on YouTube, all these swatting incidences, even if they can determine that this was a false one, there's still hours of analyzing and trying to figure out who did it. It's not just one and done.
Right.
We got 5 minutes. Okay, you're good. Even if, like you said, even if there wasn't a basement, they're going to interrogate this guy to no end to find out why and who was behind it. Not just, oh, we'll see you later. Maybe they'll do it again. Maybe they won't. It doesn't happen that way.
No, because again, their responsibility is, oh, someone just abused the authorities to
Right.
harass another person. We need to know everything about the person who we were being compelled to harass, so we can find out why they would go this lengths to it, and then press charges and so forth. Then somehow Chris manages to get his hands on a cab and be in the perfect place at the perfect time to pick up Leon, and then he interrogates him by just driving fast on the road. Uh,
On the wrong side of the road, yeah.
yeah, on the wrong side of the road, and it's freaking him out very convincingly to the point where Chris just pulls over and has managed to snatch Leon's bag and gear and make a break for it. And then he's like, "Oh, I'm a clever guy. I disabled all the tracking device on the laptop." And then Andy, when she finds out that he has this stolen gear and he's brought it back to her home, she's like, "That might not be the only way that they tracked him, because their house is now surrounded." And she looks inside the bag, and inside is a pen with a tracking device in it
Yep.
that he didn't account for.
No, that was another one that was really obvious. You go through that bag and you do everything, and you don't bring it back to your safe house
No,
ever.
you do that while you're mobile or or
Yep.
or at somewhere else. But no, it's for a guy that's supposed to be this espionage pen tester, this great hacker who's been taught by the best in the world, which being his father. He makes all these mistakes that he shouldn't make, and he should be encountering more inventive obstacles to put him in these situations, because really it's just he's constantly on the run, and now he's on the run with Andy. And this is where we kind of get to where we can do our cutoff for the spoiler talk, because
Right.
he then finds out, oh, there's this deal going down with some guy named Victor Bulgov. And Victor Bulgov is the one that's hired Charles slash Noah to implicate Chris in this espionage, which also led to this guy's murder. So as you can tell by my describing of the plot, it's rather complicated.
Yeah, but here's the thing too. You think of any Russian espionage and a train combined, you already know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You've seen it before.
Yes, we have, and we've seen it done better too. And
Hmm.
and even the beats like in this scene are straight out of Mission Impossible, the Brian De
Yep.
Palma one. And I mean, the only thing they don't do is they don't have the set piece outside on top of the train, but it gets really close there, and it's a very contrived script. And this is where we find out that Gwen is really on the side of Noah slash Charles, which is why she pulled over to help him. They realized that he was going to go after her, so they made sure that she was there available for him, and that's why she agreed to help him and then sleep with him and all the stupid stuff. And it's trying to be clever with the duplicity, but it's so heavy-handed, you see it coming a mile away.
Yeah, this is very freshman level, very much, and I'm not
Yeah.
talking college either. Well, maybe modern college, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. So before we get to our decision process here, is there any final thoughts you have about the script?
Um, I final thoughts. My wife asked me about that too, and she goes, "Well, it kind of looks like it could have been interesting." Because I talked to her about it, and I says, "Well, it could have been interesting if it was written by someone who knew what they were doing, who knew what the modern tech involves, knew anything about security, cybersecurity in big industrial things, and if someone had wrote an original story, not something that it I told her, and I'm sure any of you, if you were to read the script, and I would be surprised if any of you who listen to this, after going through the first 2 pages, don't already have a pretty dang good guess of what's going to happen throughout the whole story. Because, yeah, final thoughts. Been there, done that. Seen it too many times, and most of the time it's been a lot better.
Yeah, I'm in the same book. This script felt like the writer watched Mission Impossible, Conspiracy Theory, The Fugitive,
Yep.
All of those films, broke them down on a beat sheet, mixed and mashed them, put them together, and then added on this veneer of the Pentester, the cybersecurity espionage stuff, but didn't do the legwork needed to make it as convincing as possible the way that those example films were.
Right.
And that hurt it a lot because the premise works. Oh, you have a guy that is hired to break into private companies to test their level of security. There's a story that can be told there, especially one involving, say, a frame job.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Those are reliable. They're safe. They're easy to follow. The next step is you got to make these characters sing so that we want to root for them and we like them. Not all of these characters were great. Maybe Fred was good, but I mean, he comes in too late, and
I like the cat.
his pawn shop scene was too ridiculous.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah, the cat was nice because all it did was scratch and do nothing. That's the other part too. Like, I mean, the character count was decently low enough, but no one really stood out. I couldn't really tell you what Chris's flaw or goal was other than my freedom.
Right.
And while that can be good on the surface, I would like something a little bit more underneath, because even with like The Fugitive, Harrison Ford's character was his freedom, but it was also seeking justice because someone took his wife and he loved her, genuinely loved her, and he wanted that person that murdered her to pay. So
Right.
you have this extra piece of motivation. It's like, I need to be free so I can get my wife's murderer behind bars. It's not, I need to be free for the sake of being free. Like,
Yeah.
this
And there
here,
wasn't even a hesitation, beat, second thought, anything about Maria. She's dead. We're done. I need the stuff that she left in her apartment, but
yep, she's dead.
okay.
We're done. I'm going to go bang Gwen now,
Yep.
guilt free, and that it's really,
They're all shallow.
yeah, it is very. It's very shallow. It's. I mean, I don't want anyone to be insulted when I say this, but it's written by a person who's only ever watched movies and never really read a book, or
Yes.
or stopped to think about the movies that they watched and what they actually mean and what they're trying to accomplish, and the stuff that's beyond that. Because even in your schlocky stuff that's out there, as bad as that can be, the people behind it are trying to say something a little bit deeper. They're just not able to articulate it as well with their skill set, but they're trying.
Yep.
And
There always has to be some human motivation.
exactly. And this one here, it's a very low-hanging, animalistic self-preservation motivation, and I don't care because you haven't made Chris a character I'm interested in seeing win. That's just my thoughts on it. So, Adega, would you green light or pass on this script if you were in the position to do so?
It's pretty obvious. I would pass, and I wouldn't, even if it was rewritten for most of it, I would say it would have to be maybe 5% of the script existing. Like you said, the original premise, we have a Pentester that was caught in something, and that's it. Everything else needs to be thrown away. It was just that bad for me.
Yeah.
It was so. At this point, this would be the ultimate in cliche scripts. It's all been done before. You know exactly what's going to happen, and it was poorly written. Just no.
And
This one
you're
hard
lacking the
pass.
fun. Like, there's one thing where it's like you're ahead of the movie, but you're having fun watching it because that makes it like
Right,
enjoyable. Versus
right,
you're ahead of the movie and it's kind of boring. And I would
right.
pass on it too. Like, I am kind of shocked that this placed as high as it did on the blacklist, because again, the blacklist is not about quality. It's about it's about the scripts that producers liked themselves the most, that they would probably invest in. And this one placed 34, and I would put this towards the bottom, like the bottom 70 of the
Agreed.
years personally for myself, because this is,
Agreed.
I mean, the premise alone would get it into the blacklist, I guess, but the execution itself, no way. Like, this is like, even like there's a number of times where he doesn't even spell Maria's name correctly. So, I mean, that doesn't hold. It's kind of insulting to me as a writer that, that's what he's done. But, um, yeah, like this was. I mean, I'm sorry that this kind of broke your good luck streak, a day of always
Yeah,
having these
I was
double.
just gonna say I was 3-0, and then boom, now we got one we can't do.
Yeah.
Because the three before were actually really good, and they should have been movies, but this no.
No, I mean this one. I mean, if I were a hack, I'd steal the premise and rewrite it myself. Uh, but I was like, nah, I've got better ideas. I don't want to tackle in this territory. But I do want to thank all of you out there listening, especially Brett Cohen, who sent in a $10 super chat sticker of a Sheba Dub clutching a heart, and of course the beautiful Miss Martin Muses with a 99-cent rose. Thank you so much for supporting the show this evening. I hope you've enjoyed listening to us trash this script for the last 95 minutes,
Well,
which
that's
is.
one thing though I do have to say is if it was going to be bad, at least we had a really good laugh at it, you know. I may have ruined my
Mhm.
record, but I'm laughing at this.
I'm laughing at this too. 'Cause I was laughing while reading this because I'm like, this is just silly. I mean, the other part too is, again, the sign of a good writer is that you don't realize that this was written, but while you're reading it, this story feels natural. But there are so many moments where the writer's hand was showing because Chris would be put in a precarious situation, and then something convenient would occur that allowed him to escape, which means that Chris, the character, is not active in his own egress of sorts,
Right.
and that's what you need to do for your stories is your characters, whether they're the antagonist, the protagonist, or supporting characters. It's a David Mamet axiom. I mean, he's not the one that kind of put it into the zeitgeist of things, but he's the one who preaches it the most, which is that every action your characters do and everything that they say should be predicated on them achieving their own goal. So if you have two people in a room, say they're on a date, and the man uh, is doing this as a favor to a friend, and the woman on the date desperately wants to sleep with this guy tonight and have a relationship with, that conversation should be motivated by everything that she says, should be getting her closer and closer to convincing him to do what she wants. And for him, he should be doing everything he can to be respectful of her because he's helping out a friend and not pushing this beyond his own comfort zone. And that's where you get your conflict and your drama. And if you don't think about that when you're writing your characters, you get this type of script here where they're just saying
Right.
exposition to get from one beat to the next, but the cause and effect is flimsy at best. And yeah, you.
Yeah, and it's not just the characters too. The tech in there was really weak. You talked about the lanyards, and before we started, I talked about, and some of you've probably seen these because it talks about them lifting a pattern off of a keypad so they knew the keystrokes. But the modern keypads, they randomize. Every time you touch a button, it will switch numbers, and you have to sit there and think. So even if you had a far off binoculars and were watching the pattern that the person doing, it means absolutely nothing. Or if you go in there and like they did, you put tape on it and lift up the finger patterns, it means nothing because the numbers underneath the screen have been randomized every time you touch it. It just no, it's not just the characters. The author needed actual working knowledge of this type of technology, and it was very, like you said, 80s rudimentary.
Yeah. um and it just goes to show that your love of a genre, your love of an idea is not enough to do it its own justice. You have to put in the work.
Yes.
And that's just the case here. I don't think the effort was directed in the best way for this script, for this concept. So those are my thoughts. That's yours for you, Adega.
Hmm.
Um, I think we're gonna wrap it up. So please, Adega, share with us where we can find you and some of your wonderful work.
You can find me a Dega Outlaw here on YouTube. I do my editing, and I've talked with Script about it. I do my channel specifically so I can hear pace, rhythm, use of words, different things when I'm writing, and then I play it back. And some people got interested, so I decided to put images and music with it long ago. So you can hear my current stuff that I'm editing. And I have 7 books on the market. One of them I found that there was quite a bit of errors in it, and it has to deal with previous publisher difficulties. And so I'm reworking it. If you want the Blood Witch, I would recommend getting it only from Amazon temporarily. I should have the Barnes and Noble one repaired up and going. Kindle I had to pull down for the same reason. But people like my stuff that they get a chance to read it. So if you're into sci-fi or dark fantasy, it's not real. It's more of a bloody type of fantasy, not necessarily anything else. But I got fans, and it makes me feel good about it. So if you're bored and you want a Sunday afternoon radio drama, come listen to my channel. But that's about it.
And I'd highly recommend it because it is something that I do listen to on occasion. So please feel free to check that out. Thank you so much, Adega, for joining us this week. And we hope to see you soon.
Always fun. Thank you.
Absolutely. I want to thank everyone out there listening live. Again, Ms. Martin Muses and, of course, Brett Cohen. Thank you so much for the support. Always appreciated. If you'd like to support the show, please consider joining my Patreon at patreon.com/scriptdoctor, where the first week is at the base tier is free, and you get a backlog of all of my posts, my musings, my reviews, and we also get a little heads up with regards to what screenplay we're reviewing on the following Saturday on this show. Please feel free to comment on this channel and on the Patreon, and at the end of every episode, those comments that are there, we will be happy to read them out and discuss some regarding this week's script or last week's script, depending on the context. I want to wish everyone, as always, a wonderful weekend. And until next time, guys, remember. Oh, my gosh.
Here you go.
Sorry, I had a hiccup just there. Okay. Remember, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.